A poor mother begged for milk at the store, until a single dad stepped forward. The fluorescent lights of the quick-stop convenience hummed overhead, casting harsh white shadows across tired faces. It was 9 p.m. on a Thursday, the kind of hour when desperation wore its most honest face. Elena Morrison stood at the checkout counter, her hands trembling slightly as she held a gallon of whole milk. She was 32 years old, though the exhaustion etched into her features made her look older. Her jeans were clean but faded. Her coat had been expensive once, maybe 5 years ago. Now the hem was frayed and the buttons hung loose. "I can pay you tomorrow," she said quietly, meeting the cashier's eyes with as much dignity as she could gather. "I get paid in the morning. I just need this tonight. My son." The cashier, a kid barely 20 with a name tag that read Tyler, smirked. "Yeah, everyone's got a story, lady. You got money or not? Please, I'm asking for one day." Tyler's voice rose, loud enough that other customers turned to stare. "If you can't afford milk, maybe you shouldn't have kids. This ain't a charity." Heat flooded Elena's cheeks. 3 other customers watched from nearby aisles. An older woman whispered something to her husband. A teenager pulled out his phone. Elena's throat tightened. She'd been a senior executive once, commanding boardrooms and 6-figure salaries. Now she was being humiliated over $3.49. She started to set the milk down, blinking back tears, when a deep voice cut through the shame. "I'll cover it." A man stepped forward from the energy drink aisle. He was late 30s, wearing a factory work jacket with grease stains on the sleeves. His face was weathered, with lines around his eyes that spoke of long hours and longer years. A small girl, maybe 6, held his hand, watching everything with wide, intelligent eyes. The man pulled a worn wallet from his pocket and handed Tyler a $5 bill. "Keep the change." Tyler took the money without apology. The man picked up the milk and offered it to Elena. Their eyes met. His were dark brown, kind despite their weariness. Hers were gray-green, intelligent despite their desperation. Something passed between them in that moment. Recognition, maybe. 2 people who understood what it meant when the world stopped caring whether you survived. "Thank you," Elena whispered, her voice cracking. He nodded once. "We all need help sometimes." She took the milk, their fingers brushing for half a second. Then he was gone, his daughter looking back over her shoulder as they walked toward the door. Elena stood there holding the gallon of milk like it was something precious, tears finally spilling over, grateful and humiliated and strangely hopeful all at once. Outside, the man loaded groceries into a beat-up Toyota. He didn't look back, but his daughter did, waving once before climbing into the car. Elena watched them drive away, disappearing into the night. She didn't know his name. She didn't know that in helping her, he'd just changed the trajectory of both their lives. Marcus Hayes was 38 years old, and every morning he woke to the sound of an alarm that felt like an accusation. The apartment was small, a 1-bedroom in a building where the heat worked sporadically and the neighbors' arguments bled through thin walls. His daughter Lily slept on the pull-out couch in the living room, her drawings taped to every available surface. Crayon sunsets, marker rainbows, a child's vision of color in a world that had gone gray. He worked the line at Riverside Manufacturing, assembling automotive parts for 10 hours a day, 6 days a week. His hands were perpetually stained with machine oil. His back ached from standing. But the job paid $14 an hour, and with overtime, he could almost make rent and keep Lily fed. Almost. 3 years ago, his wife Sarah had died from diabetic ketoacidosis. Not because diabetes was untreatable, because they couldn't afford her insulin. Apex Pharmaceuticals had raised the price from $90 a vial to $400 in less than 2 years. Their insurance covered some of it, but the copays and deductibles were impossible. Sarah started rationing, stretching a week's supply across 10 days, then 2 weeks. Her body couldn't compensate. Marcus had held her hand in the emergency room while doctors tried to stabilize her blood sugar. Too late. She'd slipped into a coma and never woke up. 29 years old. Dead because a corporation decided profit margins mattered more than human life. He tried to sue. The lawyers told him he had no case. Apex Pharmaceuticals had an army of legal experts and unlimited resources. Marcus had grief and a $6,000 retainer he couldn't afford. The case died before it began. Now, he lived in the wreckage. Medical debt collectors called 3 times a week. He'd lost their house, their savings, everything they'd built together. All he had left was Lily and a silver bracelet on his wrist, engraved with 5 words Sarah had given him on their last anniversary. Love is the only currency. He believed that once. Now he knew better. Love couldn't buy insulin. Love couldn't stop a corporation from choosing profit over people. Love just made the loss more excruciating. Every night after Lily fell asleep, Marcus would sit at the kitchen table and count cash. Rent was due in 9 days. Groceries could stretch another week if he skipped lunch at work. Lily's school supplies, her winter coat that was already too small, the electric bill that threatened disconnection. It all piled up like an avalanche he couldn't outrun. He told himself if they could just make it a spring, things would get better. Spring always felt like possibility. But winter had a way of killing hope. That's why he'd paid for the woman's milk at the store. Not because he had money to spare. He didn't. But because he remembered what it felt like to stand at a counter and realize the world had decided you weren't worth saving. And because Sarah would have done the same thing back when she was alive and the world still made sense. Elena Morrison had once been someone who mattered. She graduated summa cum laude from Northwestern with a degree in pharmaceutical economics. By 27, she was a senior analyst at Apex Pharmaceuticals, earning $120,000 a year, wearing tailored suits, presenting pricing strategies to rooms full of executives who listened because her projections were always accurate. She'd been good at her job. Too good. She designed the insulin pricing model that maximized profit margins while maintaining plausible deniability about patient impact. At the time, it had felt like a puzzle, an intellectual exercise. Numbers on spreadsheets, market elasticity, competitive positioning. She hadn't thought about the people on the other end of those numbers. Not really. Not until it was too late. Her husband, Michael, was a patent attorney. Together, they'd lived in a brownstone in Lincoln Park, vacationed in Tuscany, planned for children someday when their careers stabilized. Life had been comfortable, insulated, safe. Then she'd found the reports. Internal documents buried in a server she'd accessed by accident while researching a different project. Patient outcome data that Apex's legal team had suppressed. Hospitalization rates. Deaths. Correlations between price increases and diabetic ketoacidosis incidents. The numbers were damning. Her pricing model hadn't just maximized profits. It had killed people. Hundreds of people. Maybe thousands. Elena had gone to her supervisor, then to the VP of her division, finally to the board itself. She'd presented the data, demanded they roll back prices, threatened to go to federal regulators if they didn't act. They'd smiled, thanked her for her diligence, and told her they'd look into it. 2 weeks later, she was fired. Not officially for whistleblowing. That would be illegal. For performance issues and cultural misalignment. Her severance was contingent on signing an NDA. She refused. They blacklisted her. Quietly, efficiently, the way corporations destroy people without leaving fingerprints. Michael left 6 months later. He'd been offered partner at his firm, contingent on distancing himself from her growing reputation as a troublemaker. He chose his career. She didn't blame him. She'd have done the same thing back when she was the person who designed pricing models and didn't think about the consequences. She tried to sue Apex. The lawsuit was dismissed on procedural grounds. Her lawyers told her the company had judges and regulators in their pocket. Fighting them would bankrupt her. It did anyway. By the time her son was born, an unplanned pregnancy from a brief relationship that ended when the man realized she had nothing left to offer. Elena was living in her car, working 3 part-time jobs that paid minimum wage, trying to figure out how to feed a baby when she could barely feed herself. She'd fallen from boardrooms to begging for milk in convenience stores. And the cruelest irony? The company that had destroyed her had destroyed countless others first. She'd helped them do it. Now, she was just another casualty of the machine she'd built. 2 days after the convenience store, Marcus saw her again. He was walking to his car after a double shift, exhausted to the bone, when he noticed the Honda Civic parked under a broken streetlight in the corner of his apartment complex's lot. The windows were fogged from the inside. Someone was living in that car. He slowed, peering through the darkness. Then he recognized her, the woman from the store. She was sitting in the driver's seat, illuminated by the glow of a phone screen, feeding an infant with a bottle. Her face was drawn with exhaustion, but her movements were gentle, practiced. Marcus stood there for a long moment, debating. He had enough problems. He didn't need to adopt someone else's. But then Lily's voice echoed in his memory from 2 nights ago, asking why the lady at the store had been crying, if they could help her somehow. And Sarah's voice, older and quieter. We help because we can. That's the only reason that matters. He walked to his apartment, grabbed a grocery bag, filled it with bread, peanut butter, crackers, a couple of apples. Then he walked back to the Civic and knocked gently on the window. Elena, startled, eyes wide with fear. Then recognition flickered across her face. She rolled down the window halfway, defensive but wary. "I'm not here to cause trouble," Marcus said quietly. "I just thought you might be hungry." She stared at the bag, then at him. "Why are you helping me?" "Because I've been close to where you are. Closer than you'd think." She took the bag slowly, like it might vanish if she moved too fast. "Thank you. I'll pay you back. Don't worry about it." They sat in awkward silence for a moment. Then Elena spoke, her voice careful. "You live here? Building C. You're parked in guest parking. Security doesn't check often, but they will eventually." "I know. I've been moving every few days." Marcus looked at the infant in her arms, sleeping now, tiny and fragile. "How old?" 3 months. "His name is Daniel." "That's a good name." Marcus hesitated, then asked the question that had been nagging him since the store. "You're educated. I can tell by the way you talk. What happened?" Elena's jaw tightened. "I made a mistake. A big one. And I'm paying for it. We all make mistakes. Not like mine." She looked at him directly, and there was something in her eyes, guilt, grief, determination. "I worked for a pharmaceutical company. I helped them do something terrible. Then I tried to stop them, and they destroyed me for it." Marcus felt his stomach drop. Pharmaceutical company. There were dozens in Chicago, but his mind went immediately to Apex, the company that killed Sarah. He pushed the thought away. Coincidence? Had to be. "What company?" he asked, keeping his voice neutral. Elena hesitated, then shook her head. "It doesn't matter now. I lost everything anyway." She was hiding something. Marcus could feel it, but he didn't push. People were entitled to their secrets, especially when they were living in their cars. "If you need anything," he said, "I'm in apartment 2C. I work a lot, but if there's an emergency." "Why are you being so kind?" Elena interrupted, her voice breaking slightly. "You don't know me." Marcus looked at her, really looked at her. Despite the exhaustion and the desperation, there was strength in her face. Intelligence. A quiet dignity that reminded him painfully of Sarah, who'd faced her death with more grace than anyone should have to summon. "Because kindness is free," he said simply. "And it's the only thing we have that they can't take away." 3 days later, Marcus found Elena's car gone. He told himself it didn't matter, that she'd probably found a better parking lot, a shelter maybe. But the worry gnawed at him through his shift at the factory. When he got home that night and saw the Civic back in the same spot, relief flooded through him in a way that should have been a warning. He knocked on her window again. This time she didn't startle. She rolled it down and looked at him with resignation. "I know. I'll move. That's not why I'm here." Marcus took a breath. "My apartment has a couch. It's not much, but it's warmer than a car. You and your son can stay there until you get back on your feet." Elena stared at him like he'd spoken a foreign language. "You don't even know me. I know you're trying. That's enough. I could be dangerous, unstable. I could rob you. You won't. How do you know? Because you asked if you could pay tomorrow for milk instead of just walking out with it. People who steal don't ask permission first." Elena's eyes filled with tears. She wiped them away quickly, angry at herself for the display of weakness. "I can't pay rent. I'm not asking you to. I'm offering a couch and access to a shower. If you want to contribute, you can watch Lily when I work nights. Saves me babysitter money." She looked at her son, then back at Marcus. Every instinct screamed that accepting charity was surrender, that she'd already lost too much dignity to lose more. But Daniel was starting to cough at night from the cold, and she was so tired of being scared. "Okay," she whispered. "Thank you." 2 hours later, Elena stood in Marcus's tiny apartment, holding Daniel and looking around at the peeling paint covered by children's drawings, the furniture held together with hope and duct tape, the kitchen that barely fit 2 people. It was the most beautiful place she'd seen in months. "Bathroom's there," Marcus said, pointing. "Hot water's temperamental, but functional. Towels in the cabinet. You and Daniel can have the bedroom. Lily and I will take the living room." "I'm not taking your bed. You have an infant. I have a 6-year-old who thinks sleeping on the couch is an adventure." "It's fine." Elena wanted to argue, but exhaustion won. "Just until I get my first paycheck. 2 weeks, maybe 3. Take your time." She didn't believe she'd stay that long. But as she stood under the hot water of a shower for the first time in 2 weeks, washing the grime of parking lots and public restrooms from her skin, she felt something dangerous unfold in her chest. Hope. In the living room, Marcus explained to Lily that they had guests for a while. His daughter looked at him with eyes too wise for 6 years old. "Is she like Mom was? Someone who needs help?" Marcus's throat tightened. "Yeah, baby. Something like that. Then we should help her. Mom would want us to." That night, Elena emerged from the bedroom in clean clothes from her car, a sweater and jeans that hung looser than they should have, and found Marcus heating up soup on the stove. He'd fed Lily already. The girl was coloring at the kitchen table, glancing occasionally at baby Daniel sleeping in a makeshift bassinet made from a laundry basket lined with blankets. "You didn't have to cook for me," Elena said. "It's just canned soup. Nothing fancy." They ate in companionable silence, the kind that felt easier than conversation. After Lily went to bed, Elena and Marcus sat on opposite ends of the couch, a careful distance between them, both pretending not to notice how small the apartment felt with 2 adults navigating its spaces. "Can I ask you something?" Elena said quietly. "Why are you really doing this?" Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Then he pulled up his sleeve, showing her the bracelet. "My wife died 3 years ago. We lost everything trying to save her. After she was gone, people were kind when they didn't have to be. A neighbor who brought casseroles. A coworker who covered my shifts. Small things that felt enormous. I guess I'm paying it forward." Elena reached out without thinking, her fingers brushing the engraved words on the bracelet. "Love is the only currency." When she looked up, Marcus was watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Something warm and careful and tinged with fear. "She sounded like she was wonderful," Elena whispered. "She was." Their hands were still touching, barely, the bracelet between them like a bridge. Neither of them pulled away. 3 weeks passed. Elena found work as a night shift data entry clerk, barely minimum wage, but enough to start saving. She watched Lily during Marcus's overtime shifts. They developed routines. She'd make coffee in the mornings. He'd pick up groceries on his way home. They'd eat dinner together, Lily chattering about school, while Daniel cooed from his bassinet. It felt dangerously close to a life. The attraction between them had become impossible to ignore. The way Marcus's hand would linger on her shoulder when he passed behind her in the narrow kitchen. How Elena would catch herself staring at him when he played with Lily, the gentleness in his movements making her chest ache. They hadn't kissed, hadn't even acknowledged what was building, but it hummed in the air between them like electricity. Then came the night everything broke. Marcus came home early from his shift, equipment malfunction, shutting down the line. He found Elena sitting on the couch with her laptop, her face illuminated by the screen, tears streaming down her cheeks. She was looking at a news article. He could see the headline from across the room. Apex Pharmaceuticals CEO awarded bonus despite patient deaths controversy. "Elena," he said carefully. "What's wrong?" She looked up, startled, and quickly tried to close the laptop. But he'd already seen it. Apex, the company that killed Sarah. The company Elena had said she worked for, though she'd never named it directly. "Is that where you worked?" Marcus asked, his voice suddenly cold. "Apex Pharmaceuticals." Elena's face went white. "Marcus, answer the question." She stood, setting the laptop aside, her hands shaking. "Yes, I work there. But it's not. What did you do there?" "I was in the pricing division." The room tilted. Marcus felt like he was underwater, sound muffled and distant. "Pricing. You set drug prices." I did. But when I found out what it was doing to people, I tried to stop it. I went to the board. I reported them. That's why I lost everything. You set the prices. Marcus's voice was barely above a whisper, but carried the weight of 3 years of grief. Sarah's insulin. The prices that killed her. You did that. I didn't know. You didn't know? The explosion came from somewhere primal. Lily appeared in the hallway, frightened, but Marcus couldn't stop. You worked in pricing, and you didn't know people were dying? I knew it would impact people, but I didn't understand the scope until I saw the suppressed data. That's when you what? Developed a conscience? How noble. My wife is dead because of people like you. Because executives sitting in comfortable offices decided profits mattered more than human lives. Elena was crying now, openly, desperately. I know what I did. I've spent every day since trying to make it right. That's why I'm here, Marcus. That's why I have nothing. Because I tried to expose them, and they destroyed me for it. You should have thought about that before you designed the system. You're right. You're absolutely right. I was complicit. I was part of something evil, and I didn't see it until it was too late. But I'm trying. Trying doesn't bring Sarah back. Marcus grabbed his keys from the counter. I need you out. Tonight. Marcus, please. My wife died rationing insulin because she couldn't afford what people like you decided it should cost. And I've been falling in love with you. His voice broke on the last word. How sick is that? Elena reached for him, but he stepped back like her touch would burn. I didn't know about Sarah. I swear I didn't know. If I could undo it. But you can't. None of us can. So get your things and get out of my home. He walked out of the apartment, leaving Elena standing there with Lily watching from the hallway and baby Daniel starting to cry. The door slammed behind him, the sound echoing like a verdict. Elena sank to the couch, her body shaking with sobs. She'd known this moment would come eventually. You couldn't outrun your past. You couldn't erase the damage you'd caused, no matter how much you suffered for it afterward. She'd helped kill his wife, and for 3 weeks, she'd let herself believe she deserved his kindness, his warmth, the possibility of something beautiful rising from the ashes of everything she'd destroyed. She'd been wrong. Some sins didn't earn redemption. They just earned exactly what you had coming. Marcus drove for 2 hours, windows down despite the cold, trying to outrun the fury burning in his chest. But rage had nowhere to go except inward, where it mixed with grief and something worse. The memory of Elena's face when he'd told her to leave. The guilt in her eyes. The resignation. Like she'd been waiting for this moment, expecting it, maybe even believing she deserved it. He ended up at Sarah's grave. The headstone was simple, all he could afford. Sarah Michelle Hayes, beloved wife and mother. 1994 to 2021. He sat on the cold ground and talked to her like he sometimes did when the world felt too heavy. I met someone, he said quietly, and I screwed it up. Or maybe it was already screwed up from the beginning. She worked for Apex, the company that killed you. She helped design the pricing, and I didn't know until tonight. The wind moved through the cemetery trees. Somewhere a bird called out. I told her I was falling in love with her, right before I kicked her out. Real smooth, right? His voice cracked. What am I supposed to do with that? She's the reason you're dead, but she's also the reason I felt alive for the first time in 3 years. He stayed there until his phone buzzed. A text from Lily's babysitter asking when he'd be home. He'd forgotten about Lily in his rage, forgotten everything except the pain. He drove back to the apartment, expecting Elena to be gone. She wasn't. She was sitting on the couch, her laptop open, documents spread across the coffee table. Baby Daniel slept in the bassinet. Lily was in bed. Elena looked up when he entered, her eyes red, but her jaw set with determination. I'm leaving in the morning, she said quietly. But before I go, you need to see this. Elena, please, just look. She turned the laptop toward him. The screen showed an internal Apex Pharmaceuticals email chain. The subject line read, Morrison Whistleblower Threat Assessment. Marcus scanned the messages. Elena's name appeared dozens of times. References to her allegations, discussions of containment strategies, legal tactics to neutralize her credibility. I found evidence of what they were doing, Elena said, her voice steady despite the tears on her cheeks. Not just the pricing manipulation, but deliberate suppression of patient outcome data. They knew people were dying. They had the numbers. And they buried them because admitting the problem would mean rolling back prices and losing billions in revenue. She pulled up another document, a spreadsheet with names, dates, causes of death. Marcus saw Sarah's name. Third page, halfway down. Sarah Michelle Hayes. Age, 29. Diabetic ketoacidosis. Date of death, March 15, 2021. His vision blurred. I try to take this to federal regulators, Elena continued. I filed a whistleblower complaint with the FDA. I contacted journalists. I did everything I was supposed to do. And Apex's legal team destroyed every attempt. They have people in the regulatory agencies. They have connections in media companies. They've been killing people for profit and getting away with it for years. Marcus couldn't speak. He was staring at Sarah's name on that spreadsheet, one line among hundreds. The man responsible is Richard Castellano, Elena said. He's the CEO. He personally ordered my termination. He personally approved the strategy to suppress the patient death data. And he's still there, still making millions while people die. She closed the laptop and looked at Marcus directly. You have every right to hate me. I hate myself. I was part of this machine before I understood what it was really doing. But Marcus, I've spent the last 2 years trying to bring them down, and I can't do it alone. I don't have credibility anymore. I'm just a disgraced ex-employee living in her car. But you're a victim. You have a story people will listen to. And together, maybe we can actually make them pay. Marcus sat down slowly, his mind racing. Everything he'd felt for the past 3 years, the helplessness, the rage at a system that had crushed him and moved on without consequences, suddenly had a target. Not Elena. Castellano. The board. The entire corrupt apparatus that had decided Sarah's life wasn't worth protecting their profit margins. What are you proposing? He asked. Apex is having its annual shareholder meeting in 3 weeks. It's public. There's a comment period where shareholders can speak. I still own shares from my time there. Not many, but enough to get me in the room. We present the evidence publicly, in front of journalists and investors and cameras. We make it impossible for them to bury it this time. They'll destroy us. They already destroyed me. And they destroyed you when they killed Sarah. What else can they take? Marcus looked at her, really looked at her. She was still the woman who'd begged for milk in a convenience store. Still the woman who'd cried when he'd shown her basic kindness. But she was also something else. A fighter. Someone who'd lost everything and was still swinging. Okay, he said. Let's burn them down. For the next 3 weeks, Marcus and Elena worked like soldiers preparing for war. The apartment transformed into a command center. Documents covered every surface. Timeline charts traced Apex's price increases against patient death spikes. Elena's laptop ran continuously, compiling testimony from other whistleblowers she'd connected with over the past 2 years. Former employees who'd witnessed the corruption but lacked the platform to expose it. Marcus reached out to families he'd met through diabetes advocacy groups. People who'd lost loved ones to insulin rationing. Parents who'd buried children. Spouses who'd watched partners die from preventable complications. By the end of the first week, he'd recruited 47 families willing to protest at the shareholder meeting. By the end of the second week, that number had grown to 200. Elena contacted journalists. Most ignored her. She was a known troublemaker, blacklisted by the industry, dismissed as a disgruntled former employee with an axe to grind. But one investigative reporter from the Chicago Tribune responded. Her name was Jennifer Cho, and she'd been trying to crack the Apex story for 3 years. She agreed to attend the shareholder meeting with a camera crew if Elena could guarantee the evidence would be compelling. It will be, Elena promised. I'm presenting internal documents that prove they knew people were dying and chose profit anyway. And we'll have victim families outside showing exactly what that choice cost. They worked late into the nights, Elena organizing the presentation while Marcus coordinated logistics for the protest. Sometimes Lily would wake up and find them still at the kitchen table surrounded by papers, talking in low, urgent voices. She'd climb into Marcus's lap without a word, and he'd hold her while continuing to work, grateful for the weight of her reminder about what mattered. The attraction between Marcus and Elena hadn't disappeared. If anything, It had intensified, sharpened by shared purpose and proximity. But neither of them addressed it. There was too much history between them, too much pain. Marcus would catch himself watching her as she worked, admiring the fierce intelligence in her face, the determination that had cost her everything. And Elena would feel his gaze, would look up and meet his eyes, and something would pass between them that neither was ready to name. One night, exhausted after 16 hours of preparation, they both fell asleep on the couch. Marcus woke at 3 a.m. to find Elena's head resting on his shoulder, her hand curled against his chest. He should have moved. Instead, he stayed perfectly still, breathing in the scent of her shampoo, letting himself have this one stolen moment of peace before everything exploded. When dawn came, Elena stirred and realized where she was. She pulled back quickly, apologizing. "Don't," Marcus said quietly. "It's okay." "Is it?" Elena asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "After everything I did? I don't know yet, but I know we're doing something that matters. And I know Sarah would have liked you. She would have respected what you're trying to do." Tears filled Elena's eyes. "I wish I could have met her. I wish I could apologize. Maybe the best apology is making sure no one else dies the way she did." Elena nodded, wiping her eyes. Then she surprised him by taking his hand, just for a moment, squeezing it gently. "Thank you for giving me a chance to try." 3 days before the shareholder meeting, they received a warning. An anonymous email sent to Elena's account. "Drop this or you'll regret it. We know where you live. We know about the kid." Marcus read it and felt ice flood his veins. They were threatening Lily, threatening Daniel. He looked at Elena, saw the fear in her face mirroring his own. "We can stop," she said. "I can disappear. You can." "No." Marcus's voice was steel. "That's what they want. They've been using fear to silence people for years. We're not backing down. They could hurt our children. Then we make sure they're safe. I'll send Lily to my sisters in Wisconsin. You take Daniel somewhere secure. But we don't stop. We can't." Elena looked at him for a long moment. Then she nodded. "Okay, we finish this." That night, Marcus drove Lily to the bus station with a duffel bag and instructions to stay with her aunt until he called. Lily hugged him fiercely before boarding. "Are you fighting bad people, Daddy?" she asked. "Yeah, baby. I am." Then when? The morning of the shareholder meeting arrived with clear skies and bitter cold. Outside the Apex Pharmaceuticals headquarters, 200 people gathered holding photographs. Faces of the dead. Sarah's picture was among them, held by Marcus as he stood at the front of the crowd. News cameras surrounded them. Jennifer Cho and her crew were positioned for maximum coverage. Inside the building, Elena walked through the marble lobby wearing a borrowed blazer and carrying a USB drive that contained 2 years of evidence. Her hands trembled, but her face was set with determination. She'd lost everything to get here. She wouldn't waste the moment. The boardroom was exactly as she remembered. 30-foot ceilings, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. A long mahogany table surrounded by executives in expensive suits. Richard Castellano sat at the head, 60 years old with silver hair and a smile that had never reached his eyes. He didn't recognize her at first. Why would he? She'd been nobody important, just another employee he'd discarded. The meeting proceeded normally for the first hour. Financial reports, growth projections. Castellano spoke about Apex's commitment to innovation and shareholder value. No mention of the people dying because they couldn't afford the innovations. No mention of the families bankrupted by the commitment to value. Then came the public comment period. Shareholders could address the board for 3 minutes each. Elena stood. "I have a statement," she said, her voice carrying across the room. Castellano glanced at her, still not recognizing her. "State your name and shareholding for the record." "Elena Morrison. I own 200 shares, and I used to work here as a senior analyst in your pricing division." Recognition flickered across Castellano's face. His smile hardened. "Ms. Morrison's employment was terminated for reporting that you were killing people," Elena interrupted. "For discovering that Apex Pharmaceuticals deliberately suppressed patient outcome data, showing that insulin price increases were causing deaths. For trying to stop you from choosing profit over human life." The room erupted. Board members spoke over each other. Castellano called for security, but Elena had already plugged the USB drive into the presentation system. The screen behind her lit up with internal emails. Castellano's name appeared in bold over and over. Orders to bury reports. Instructions to fight regulatory oversight. Approvals for price increases despite warnings from medical staff. These documents show a pattern of deliberate negligence, Elena said, her voice rising above the chaos. Apex Pharmaceuticals knew their pricing would kill patients. They had the data, and they chose billions in revenue over human life. Security guards approached, but Jennifer Cho's camera crew was already recording everything. The footage was streaming live. Castellano couldn't stop it without confirming everything Elena was saying. Among the people who died, Elena continued, pulling up the spreadsheet, was Sarah Michelle Hayes, 29 years old, a mother. She rationed her insulin because she couldn't afford the prices you set. She went into diabetic ketoacidosis and died in an emergency room while her husband held her hand. She zoomed in on Sarah's name. Her husband is outside right now with 200 other families, all of them holding pictures of people you killed, all of them demanding accountability. Castellano stood, his face red. This is slander. Ms. Morrison is a disgruntled former employee with evidence, Elena said calmly. Evidence I've already provided to the FBI, the FDA, and the press. Evidence that shows you personally ordered the suppression of patient death data. Evidence that makes you criminally liable. The room went silent. Through the windows, the crowd outside had grown. News helicopters circled overhead. This wasn't going away. Jennifer Cho stepped forward, microphone in hand. Mr. Castellano, would you like to respond to these allegations on camera? Castellano looked at Elena with pure hatred. Then he looked at the screens, at the evidence displayed for everyone to see, and something in his face crumbled. He knew. It was over. This meeting is adjourned, he said, his voice barely controlled. He walked out of the boardroom, surrounded by lawyers. Outside, Marcus watched the live stream on his phone, tears running down his face. He saw Elena standing at that podium, fierce and unbreakable, giving voice to Sarah's death and hundreds of others. Around him, families cheered. Finally someone was listening. Richard Castellano was arrested 3 days later. Federal prosecutors charged him with fraud, obstruction of justice, and criminally negligent homicide. The evidence Elena had provided was damning enough that even Apex's legion of lawyers couldn't make it disappear. The company's stock dropped 40% in a week. Board members resigned. Shareholders filed lawsuits demanding accountability. Within a month, Apex Pharmaceuticals announced it would roll back insulin prices to 2015 levels and establish a victim compensation fund worth $500 million. It wasn't enough, no amount of money could be, but it was something. Families who'd been bankrupted by medical debt would receive help. Patients who'd been rationing life-saving medication would have access again. Elena became the public face of pharmaceutical reform. Congressional committees invited her to testify. Medical ethics organizations asked her to speak at conferences. The woman who'd lost everything for whistleblowing was suddenly being treated as a hero, though she refused the label. "I'm not a hero," she told one interviewer. "I helped build the system that killed people. I'm just trying to tear it down before it kills more." Marcus testified alongside her at a Senate hearing, representing the families affected by Apex's pricing. He spoke about Sarah, about watching her die, about the medical debt that had destroyed their lives even after her death. When he finished, several senators had tears in their eyes. The media coverage was relentless. Their story became a symbol of ordinary people fighting corporate greed and winning. Documentaries were commissioned. Book deals were offered. But privately, both Elena and Marcus were exhausted. Reliving trauma daily, giving interview after interview, carrying the weight of hundreds of families' grief, it was taking a toll. They were staying in separate hotel rooms during the congressional hearings, maintaining professional distance for the cameras. But late at night, Elena would text Marcus asking if he was awake. He always was. They'd talk for hours, processing the day's testimony, supporting each other through panic attacks and breakdowns that no one else could see. One night, after particularly brutal testimony, Elena knocked on Marcus's hotel room door at 2 a.m. He opened it to find her crying. "I can't do this anymore," she whispered. "I can't keep seeing their faces, hearing their stories, knowing I was part of what killed them." Marcus pulled her inside and held her while she sobbed. She collapsed against him, all the strength she'd been performing for cameras finally giving out. He guided her to the bed, and they lay down together, fully clothed, her head on his chest, his arms around her. "You're allowed to break," he said quietly. "You've been carrying this alone for too long. I don't deserve your comfort. Maybe not, but you have it anyway." They fell asleep like that, tangled together, two broken people finding temporary peace in each other's presence. When morning came, neither mentioned it. They got dressed, put on their professional faces, and went back to the hearings. But something had shifted. The wall between them was cracking. A month after Castellano's arrest, Marcus received notification that Sarah's medical debt had been forgiven as part of the compensation fund. $38,000 erased. It should have felt like victory. Instead, it felt like blood money. His wife was still dead. Daniel was still growing up without a mother. No amount of compensation would fix what had been broken. But when he looked at Elena across the conference table during yet another meeting with victims' advocates, he realized something. Sarah was gone, and nothing would change that. But Elena was here, fighting, trying to prevent more deaths, more families destroyed. And maybe that was the closest thing to redemption any of them would get. 6 months after Castellano's arrest, Elena had a real job again. A nonprofit pharmaceutical watchdog organization hired her as their director of policy reform. The pay was modest compared to her corporate days, but it felt honest. She rented a small apartment with a bedroom for Daniel, who was walking now, curious and fearless. She'd rebuilt something resembling a life. Marcus had been promoted to shift supervisor at the factory, then recruited by a patient advocacy organization to be their community organizer. He traveled to cities across the country, helping families navigate medical debt, teaching them how to fight insurance denials, giving them tools to advocate for themselves. Lily came back from Wisconsin. They moved to a better apartment, one where the heat worked and the walls were thick enough for privacy. But Marcus and Elena still saw each other constantly, planning meetings, fundraising events, strategy sessions for the ongoing legislative push to regulate drug pricing. Every time they were in the same room, the tension was palpable. Colleagues noticed. Journalists asked if they were together. Both of them deflected. The truth was they were terrified. What they'd built together was too important to risk on something as fragile as romance. If they tried and failed, it would poison everything they'd worked for. So they kept their distance, professional and careful, even as everyone around them could see what was obvious. Then came the night that changed everything. It was a charity gala, black tie event raising money for the Victim Compensation Fund. Elena wore a dress she'd borrowed from a friend, simple and elegant, dark blue that brought out her eyes. When Marcus saw her across the room, his breath caught. She wasn't the desperate woman begging for milk anymore. She was powerful, confident, transformed by purpose into something radiant. She caught him staring and smiled. A real smile, the kind that reached her eyes. He crossed the room before he could talk himself out of it. "You look beautiful," he said. "You clean up pretty well yourself." Her gaze traveled over his rented tuxedo. "I barely recognize you without grease stains." They laughed, the tension breaking slightly. Then the music started, a slow song, and Marcus did something he'd been wanting to do for months. He offered his hand. "Dance with me." Elena hesitated. On the dance floor, they wouldn't be colleagues or activists or survivors of the same corporate crime. They'd just be a man and a woman, and all the feelings they'd been suppressing would have nowhere to hide. "Okay," she whispered. He led her to the floor and pulled her close. Her hand fit perfectly in his. Her body against his felt like coming home. They swayed together, not speaking, just breathing in sync, letting the world fade around them. "I'm scared," Elena said finally, her voice barely audible. "Of what?" "Of ruining this. Of not being enough. Of you waking up one day and remembering I helped kill your wife." Marcus pulled back just enough to look at her. Sarah's death wasn't your fault. Castellanos. The system's. But not yours. You tried to stop it, and you lost everything because you did. That's who you are. Not the person who made mistakes before she knew better. The person who fought to make it right. Tears filled Elena's eyes. I don't know if I can forgive myself. Then let me help you try. He leaned in slowly, giving her time to pull away. She didn't. Their lips met softly, tentatively, a question and an answer all at once. When they broke apart, Elena was crying, but she was smiling too. Is this insane? She whispered. Probably. But I don't care anymore. I'm tired of being afraid. I'm tired of pretending I don't love you. Elena laughed, the sound breaking something open in both of them. I love you too. God help me, I do. They left the gala early, hands intertwined, walking through the city streets, talking about everything and nothing. About their children, about their work, about the possibility of building a life together from the pieces of their broken pasts. That night, Elena invited Marcus to her apartment. They sat on her couch drinking cheap wine, Daniel asleep in the next room. And when Marcus kissed her again, deeper this time, full of promise and hope, Elena felt something she hadn't felt in years. Forgiveness. Not complete, maybe never complete, but enough to start. 1 year after Richard Castellano's arrest, Marcus and Elena stood outside the quick-stop convenience. The same fluorescent lights, the same cramped aisles, but everything else had changed. They were shopping for groceries together, Lily and Daniel both in the cart, the children laughing over something only they understood. Marcus reached for Elena's hand as they walked inside, and she squeezed back, the gesture as natural as breathing now. Tyler was still working the register. He looked up when they approached, and recognition flickered across his face. He'd seen them on the news. Everyone had. The woman he'd mocked for being poor had taken down a pharmaceutical CEO. The man who'd paid for her milk had helped reform an entire industry. Tyler's face flushed. I owe you an apology. What I said that night was a reflection of a system that taught you people's worth is measured by their bank accounts, Elena said gently. You're not the villain here. Neither are we. We're just people trying to survive. They paid for their groceries, milk, bread, vegetables, ingredients for the family dinner they'd cook together later, and walked back in the sunlight. The city moved around them, indifferent and eternal. But their small corner of it felt different. Lighter. Marcus thought about Sarah often. He visited her grave once a month, bringing flowers, telling her about Lily's school achievements, about the work he was doing in her name. And he'd started bringing Elena with him. It had been Elena's idea, actually, to thank Sarah for raising a man who chose compassion, even when the world gave him every reason to choose bitterness. She would have liked you, Marcus had said the first time they stood together at the grave. I hope so, Elena had whispered. I'm trying to be worthy of what she started. Now, walking through the parking lot with their children and their groceries and the promise of dinner together, Marcus felt something he'd thought was lost forever. Peace, not the absence of pain, that would never fully disappear, but the presence of purpose, of love, of a future built from the wreckage of the past. Elena looked at him and smiled, her free hand resting on her stomach. She was 8 weeks pregnant. They found out 3 days ago. It was early, fragile, terrifying, but it was also hope, tangible proof that life continued, that joy could rise from grief, that broken people could heal each other if they were brave enough to try. What are you thinking? She asked. That we did it. We fought them, and we won. We won one battle. There are more to fight. I know, but today let's just be grateful. They loaded the groceries into Marcus's car. Newer now, reliable, bought with the settlement money that could never replace Sarah, but could at least ease the practical burdens of survival. Lily and Daniel chattered in the back seat, already arguing about what movie to watch later. Marcus started the engine, then paused. He looked at Elena, at the woman who'd walked into his life at her lowest moment and somehow become his salvation. She'd been both the person who helped destroy his past and the person who helped him build a future. Life was complicated that way, messy, full of contradictions and second chances and grace that neither of them deserved, but both had received anyway. I love you, he said simply. I love you too. They drove home together, through streets that looked the same as always but felt different now. Because they'd learned the truth that corporate greed and systemic injustice try to bury, that dignity wasn't something you could buy or sell. That compassion was stronger than profit. That sometimes the person who saves you is the one you save in return. The convenience store disappeared in the rearview mirror. Ahead of them, the city opened up, full of possibilities and challenges and the ordinary work of building a life. They'd face it together, broken but healing, guilty but forgiven, afraid but hopeful. And that was enough. That was everything.